like the companies really need to be broken up like movie and television studios. There need to be producers, quote unquote, who are also writer, artists, guys, and gals, whatever. And like, okay, you guys have the Batman books. You guys have the Superman books. You guys, and it would give the spirit also of competition that, because everyone's going to want their book to do better than the other one as well, and take total weight off DC and Marvel proper. But anyway, it just blows me away that people don't learn from the past. It's all the answers are in the past.
Hi, my name is Adam Freeman. This is Comic Industry Insiders, a weekly podcast where we talk to the people behind the scenes of the comic book industry, and we try and get to know how they built their careers and what tips and tricks they have to teach us for your business or career in comics. I've been so looking forward to this one. Brian Haberlin is something of a comics polymath. An award-winning comics creator in writing, art, inking, coloring, an innovator who brought and taught an entire generation digital coloring and lettering, a technologist who introduced AR tech to comic storytelling, and a fine artist whose paintings are selling out in galleries and festivals worldwide. Brian has been crucial to the history of comics and how we know that they are built. And I cannot wait to talk to him because he's also one of the smartest guys I know. Hi, Brian.
Oh boy, don't build me up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have done that without you listening. I apologize.
Yeah.
But you did all that shit, man.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many comics do you think? Now, well, you're older than me, but you don't look it, so I think that counts for something. I definitely look much older than you are. How many comics do you think you've worked on, created, covers, writing, any step in the creative process?
General studio stuff and yada yada. Easily a couple thousand. Easily.
A couple thousand. Yeah,
a couple thousand. I mean, I just did for shits and giggles to see how many pages I had actually drawn sequentially in the last from 2012 to now, and I've drawn 2,759 pages of sequentials. And that
just since 2012. Let me actually start off.
I've done a lot of comics.
And you've also
I've been blessed to work with great people.
You truly have.
I mean, I don't know if you had questions going on, but I was just,
I do.
My first, so I had my first job offer to work in comics when I was 18. To pencil at Marvel from Jim Shooter and John Romita Sr. But it was pretty much bullpen stuff to start with, right? But you had to, I'm a West Coast guy, you had to move to New York, and it was like $35 a page, and they wouldn't promise you work. And the idea of being a starving artist never really appealed to me. And so I went to film school instead. So I have a master's degree in communications, screenwriting. And then my first jobs were in television at Lorimar Television, which ruled television back in the day. Comedy series and drama series development, and then eventually current programs. Where
did you get anything done, produced during that period?
Well, no, that was all working for the company. So it was all working on Knots Landing, Family Matters, Perfect Strangers, Lois and Clark, a gazillion other things. But I kind of realized I didn't want to do that for a living. And I started working on comic stuff, and I the computer stuff had just kind of come out. I was an early Amiga adopter from back in the day. I had
I remember Amigas.
4,096 colors, so it was better than Apple or anything at that time.
It's incredible.
And it was a
Yeah.
great computer. The company drove it into the ground. Anyway, so I was experimenting with, because I'm always the guy. Why are things still done that way?
Yeah. Why
Is
are
there
things
not a
still done that way?
why
Yeah.
can it, or just to be done differently? That's all. And so I had my first samples of coloring in '91. Went down to San Diego, portfolio in hand, like everybody else. Getting rejected like everybody else. Because usually the people who are doing portfolio reviews are not the people who can hire you anyway, and are there because they don't, they're low man on the totem pole,
They're the
and
only ones who couldn't say no. They couldn't say no to go doing the portfolio reviews. Yeah.
so that next year, a dear friend of mine, Rod Underhill, who did a lot of underground stuff in the industry back in the day, and was a lawyer who helped a lot of people out in the industry back in the day too, Pacific Comics and all kinds of stuff he was related to. He said, "I'm going to get a booth in the small press area. You want to join me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, that sounds good." And so I had a CRT monitor that was, this wide but twice as deep and weighed 150 pounds, was on the table. I had a big inkjet print that I did of Green Lantern that I penciled, inked, and colored, with a 3D modeled power battery behind him and 3D modeled power wings behind him, big 30 by 40 behind me. And the show before, no one and their mother wanted to hire me. At this show, everybody and their mother wanted to hire me.
Yeah.
And so Mark
Does
Silvestri
mom
walked by.
pay decent page rates? Does mom, she no, but I think it's notable there. The joke was, does mom, how are the mom's page rates? But I guess it's good to note though that from the very, very beginning, you, aside from, I do want to go back and note that you turned down a job from John Romita Sr. and Jim Shooter. I think that's remarkable. It may be unique. You may be the only one who has had a career this long and has that story. But it is notable that from the very beginning of your career, you began thinking through, how can we involve technology in this process?
Yeah.
And obviously to some success, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean again, to me, because I've been a 3D modeler since the Amiga days, so essentially my workflow, like it's out there. I mean, I think you can do a how to make comics Google search and find because there's a video that I did from that San Diego did during the COVID times where they did that thing. So they have two of my tutorials up there right now, and it shows that basically design my characters, sculpt them as 3D models so I can pose them for reference or work over them or use them however I want to use them. And then I have them for animation. I have them, for sculpts that I can take
printing.
to shows, to use a promotion. And it just seemed illogical to me to, like, if I did it the other way, it's got to be drawing. Okay, then somebody else has to sculpt it. Okay, great. And now if I want to animate it, now somebody else has to rig it and texture it and stuff. And it just seemed, Pixar's not doing, animation the way that we used to do animation. And there's nothing wrong with them being done all the different ways, but it just seemed like that made so much more sense that you could do like little minis. Like these are some mini characters I did for the Stone Kickstarter that we did, and it's just, you can be a one-person comic company, entertainment company these days.
Yeah, you surely can. But it is good to note, though, that you have a studio. I've been to your studio. You have a studio full of creative people and full of interesting machines that make all sorts of weird and wild stuff. I saw people creating backgrounds that were just finding the shot inside of the background that was already there, which I found to be remarkable. And this was all for the comics page. I know that you've done 3D, like the 3D glasses. You've done that
Hmm.
those effects for, but your books and plenty of other books. I've
Yeah.
you recently, I think I highlighted somewhere on my social media the effect that you had where you cover the one eye and then the other, and you see a different image. I love that.
Well, I
What
have
do
a
you,
video of that if you want to see it.
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I tell you what, why don't you load us up with videos, Steph? We're going to show as many of these as possible. Actually, can we let's try a screen share.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and try.
I'm just gonna do that. Hang on, I think I need to get this thing up and running first so I can share it. Share screen and window. Oh, shit. So
There
I'll
we
start from the
go.
beginning. So that's the image. This is called a wink. So this is a little different than normal anaglyph 3D. So this is basically 3 images in one. So you have this image, and then you use the glasses, and you put just one of the lenses over. It's called a wink because you would close one eye and the other eye if you were wearing 3D glasses. So the skeleton becomes the image, and then to blue, it becomes just the astronaut. So 2 images in one.
Have you ever used this in a narrative? Is this? I mean, this is a cover, right? Obviously,
This
and
is a
it
cover
basically
for
is
this is a
creating a
cover
no
for the
narrative.
Faster and Light trade that's out in October, oversized 10 by 13 size, 2 Faster and Light stories, all 3D. Like, I mean, let's see, where can I do? Let's see, like, let's see, we'll play. Yeah. So this is just one of the pages from the Faster and Light thing. So this shows that from inks to color to then the 3D-ification of it. You know.
Yeah.
One of our, so we have that one, that's the let's show photos, window photos, open with photos. Yeah. Okay, share that screen. Window photos. So that's the other cover for it.
Oh,
that's all
nice.
3D-ified already, and why it looks so blurry. But then that's not enough 3D, because we have in December, which people can still order from their comic companies or their comic shops. We have the 3D Anomaly trade, the first 3D trade, and it has first issues of Hellcop in 3D, first issues of The Marked in 3D, Sonata, Captain Wonder, which hasn't seen the light of day in ages, which was Philip Tan and myself doing a superhero story, and it's 184 pages, and it's all 3D-ified.
All 3D-ified. That's incredible. That's fantastic. Well,
here we'll switch.
So let's take for a moment. Let's take a beat on this image. So is this a flat image that you sat down and penciled and inked? Is this a character that lives?
She's Lieutenant Grissom from Faster and Light. So she has been all designed, all modeled, all textured with my textures, and then basically almost using it. Think of like something that's spotting blacks for you, and then you position it how you want, whatever, and then I'm gonna do my inking and changing things, because it's not doing it 100% out of the go. It's something to work on top of.
Gotcha. So you end up essentially creating the final image as a layer, right? Yeah.
Right, but it enables me that once I have assets done for a comic, that myself and a couple other people can do 4 pages a day.
4 pages a day.
Yeah.
That's I'm sorry, 4 pages a day, like fully. I mean, we're talking pencils, inks.
Pencils, inks.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Pencils, inks.
That is that is remarkable. 4 pages a day. Okay.
Yeah.
And
that's one of the reasons why I work this way and have worked this way since my Spawn stuff was done this way, which was 2009 or 2000 whatever. And even I remember there was even like one of the first times that people used full-blown 3D in anything was when Mike Turner and I did Ballistic which was a crossover between Top Cow's Ballistic and Wetworks.
I
One of the
remember
covers,
Ballistic.
I put behind Michael's artwork full 3D rendered gold guys, so it matched the drawings and stuff.
Well, let's go back.
Back then I couldn't do my process because my process also, it's important now that we have libraries of stuff. Like I don't want to model a whole schoolroom. Why do I need to model a whole schoolroom for a set where I can buy one for $25 on that site? If I tried to do this same stuff back in the early 90s, I would literally have had to model every single thing, and that would just defeat the purpose. Also, the computers just weren't that powerful then as well.
They couldn't handle it. I think it's, it's good. You learned to speak this language just so that you could filter that through that language. But speaking of during that period, how did you become involved with the Image Comics guys?
So at that show in 93, Mark and his brother Serge walked by, and Mark took 5 looks and said, "Don't talk to anybody else." And my wife was also working at Warner Brothers, and she wasn't happy with her job. She was working for a producer there that she didn't like, and there was a little bit of the get me out of here. And we were at the time, Top Cow was sharing space with Wildstorm in Mira Mesa, which is inland San Diego. And so we would have to move. And I go, well, match my wife and my salary and we'll come down, and that's what happened. And I went down, and they threw me on a Mac for the first time because I'd always been a PC or an Amiga guy. And I was like, what the heck is this stupid beast? But, but it was, I like to say that I think I have essentially a PhD in comic creation because of all the guys I've gotten to learn from, and especially the environment in that original Homage Studios was an open office floor plan. There were like 2 offices that had doors that could shut. Everything else was open. If you weren't an ass, you could walk around and sit behind Scott Williams while he's inking and learn how he's inking and why he's inking the way he is. Same thing with Silvestri over on the other side. You had Jim Lee, Wills Portasio. You had the new kids that were starting. You had Joe Benitez. You had Brandon Peterson. You had Jeff Campbell. You had Travis Cheris. You had Dave Finch. And everybody was at the beginning of their careers learning what they could learn. There was the contention between all the different image studios, or the rivalries of like people faxing back and forth. Oh, you're ripping this guy off. Oh, you're ripping that guy off. Or this is better than your opening. And I
love that they were having flame wars with faxes. That's beautiful.
Yeah. The Xerox. I always want to poke the guy who supposedly has because all the artists especially would Xerox everybody's stuff all the time. If a page is coming out, they would Xerox it and put it in their piles. And I know Dan Fraga has a gigantic collection of all those Xeroxes from back in the day, and those would be very interesting to see.
Yeah, they really would.
When I was a kid, like the first time I went to San Diego Con was back when I was in the El Cortez, but like the second or third time where it was the old convention center, you had the reason why I wanted to do it was, back then, Artist Alley was essentially John Byrne in his Uncanny run. Next to John was Chris Claremont with typewriter. Other side of him was George Perez in his Avengers run. On the side of him was Terry Austin. Other side of John was the new kid on the block who just started in Marvel Previews, Bill Sienkiewicz on Moon Knight and Marvel Previews. And they were singing and they were laughing and they were like, okay, I want to do that for a living. That looks like a good way. But then I also remember coming back the next year, and John had gained 20 pounds. George had gained about 30. Bill lost some hair. I was like, maybe I don't want to do that for a living.
It's rough. It is rough on your body. It really is. It's that kind of work, you kind of have to pick what kind of rough you want it to be. I think on the
But
show.
I hate to say, the sad part is, though, back then is there was money to warrant the hard parts.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was a certain amount of bonuses and a certain amount of, revenue things that you would get back then because there was money in doing it. I mean, but then
yes,
the flip side of that, which was always kind of fun, was that, you know, it's all non-returnable. And as the bubble was starting to go whatever, they had books. Joe Chido always called them the little buddies, the artists that were at Image that weren't the original owners. Everyone else was the little buddies. But so you have the little buddy
okay,
books, which were the second tier books, right? But they still
yeah,
were getting orders of like 800,000, a million copies back then. And the only
yeah,
way that you're going to get that money is then if you deliver it on time. And it became, there were always like these books that should have been done months ago. And it's like, okay, you guys have to finish this book. And plus, the computers were slow. You to CMYK a book with an RGB, it took 24 hours for us to have it CMYK convert and trap a book. So even if we were done and we thought we're going to make the deadline, whatever, Dave Wall would take SideQuest drives and fly up to Canada to make something not returnable, because back then it would go from 800,000 copies to 400 or less. So you would lose $400,000 if you didn't deliver that comic.
yeah, yeah. Well, so you're gonna get on the plane, carry
You're going to
that
get on the
disc,
plane.
and make sure it happens.
Yep.
Jesus.
And there were times when it was like, is it ready? Is it ready? And it was like, it's like that scene, and remember the scene from, what was that with William Hurt and Holly Hunter, the news
Oh,
one,
broadcast news, is that it?
broadcast news.
It's
That's that scene where it's
yeah,
like, where, and I want to say it was Joan Cusack, who was the
I
young
think
assistant who
so.
had the cart and had to get the cart down to the thing. It was like dodging everybody. But it's like there would literally be the moment. It's like, we're waiting for it to finally write the last pages onto the site question. Says, we're ready. David's standing here. He's ready. Is it ready? Is it ready? Is it ready? The cab's here. Are you ready? Is it ready? Here, go.
And that scene has been referenced so many times. People are like, oh, I'm in my broadcast news moment. And you're running
Yeah,
with the disc. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I can only imagine. Like the numbers have just shifted so dramatically, from where you were back then to where I eventually entered into it, that it's almost hard for me to even wrap my head around what that
yeah.
was like for people.
No, and then you had people too who were on the cusp of, who made deals with these guys. Because again, the image owners are not businessmen. Right?
Yeah,
These are comic book guys who started businesses, and some of them learn
right.
better than others, faster than others. But there was a lot of those deals that were done in the early days where they're like, okay, great, we're going to pay you $2,000 a page to do this book. And then when the numbers were starting to listen, we kind of have to,
We said
and a lot of those
2000.
guys, and a lot of those guys would take that really personally. And a lot of those guys, I mean, that was also kind of the weird part about then was, I was a little older. I was 29, so I was married and stuff. But 90% of the quote unquote little buddies were early
Yeah,
20s, never had another job before. We're
right.
making, 20 grand a month, back then.
In
And
$93, they're making 20
yeah,
grand a month. Yeah.
yeah. And it
Damn.
was just, they bought cars they couldn't drive and crashed. And, it was just, they didn't, they things were so running so high. And this is not a total, but this is a large, they used to not go anywhere, the young ones, when they're going out, if it wasn't in a limo back in the day.
They just wouldn't leave the house without a
No, they
limo.
were like party on the weekend. Yeah.
And I think it's got to be the worst part is looking back on that and thinking, how much time what you lost, right? Too. I mean, how much lost revenue was there because you're distracted by being a 20-year-old and making $250,000 a year? You know,
Well,
how
that was
much?
funny when I first joined. So there was a ping pong table, and there was a
Yeah,
bunch of arcade games. When I
yeah.
arrived, all the arcade games were permanently turned off by Jim.
Yes, because he was the adult in the room.
The ping pong table was still there, but the rest of it,
Yeah.
and I
Well,
was the fourth best ping pong player. JD was
fourth
number
best.
one. Scott, well, let's see, Scotty Clark, Scott Williams, and then me.
Who was the number one?
JD. He was one of
JD.
Scott's inking guys.
I can only imagine. I have to believe that somewhere there's some grainy '90s VHS tape of that studio, right? It's got
Not
to be out
really.
there.
Not really. Not. I mean, yeah. I guess there was actually. You're funny because now you made me think that there was a music video that John Nee put together. I think that first year I joined. Got to keep them
Of course.
separated. It was dealing with his separation department, and it had the song "Got to Keep Them Separated." Yeah. But I got to tell
Okay.
you, I mean, if it wasn't for John Nee and Clydeen Nee, because they had color separation things, we wouldn't be able to figure out the workflow that's been used now in comics all this time that we
Oh
figured
yeah.
out back then.
Yeah. What was the process back then? Like, how did that work? Walk me through. Like, where did it start and where is it now?
Well, it used to be the Cod Barrett system. So that's Steve Oliff. Steve was top of the pyramid.
Okay.
Uh, and that was he did the first, not the first, but the first kind of professional color job with Akira, doing all the Akira books. And then he became the number one go-to guy when Image started. And the Cod Barrett system was a proprietary software system, a vector-based system. So think like Illustrator, not Photoshop. Okay.
Okay.
Um, and it was designed to work on low budget, low end 286 IBM computers, which at the time probably would run about $1,000, $2,000 maybe. Um, but it was all had a terrible interface. It was all you drew like the shape, and then you go grad from this color with numbers you put in to this number, this one that you put numbers in. And Steve would do guides for
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. You know, this is the sketch that Bill Sienkiewicz did for me when I was 16.
Oh, amazing. It's just on top of the pile. The Sienkiewicz that was.
I occasionally joke with him if I know he's going to be somewhere we're together. Uh, I'll walk up to the table and I'll have it in my hands and go, I'd like a refund.
You've done better work and you overcharged me,
But when it comes to color guides, so these are Joe Chido color guides. So when
Oh,
I started,
yeah.
they would hand you this because we were called separators when I first started. We were
Uh-huh.
colorists. And
Okay.
then we would work off guides.
Okay.
So
Okay.
these are
Yeah.
all marker Prismacolor guides that Joe Chido would do. And I remember when they first handed me one, I said, well, why don't we just scan these?
And they said,
And no,
listen, listen, youngster.
Because of Steve Oliff and the Cod Barrett system, that became the style, this banded color thing, because that's how
Okay.
structured drawing could work. You could only do so many grads and stuff. So this style that I was actually at the time trying to get away from, because I was now having computers that would do millions of colors as opposed to 4,000 colors. The whole idea of going back to doing banded colors to me was like, no, that's not the
Yeah.
goal. The goal is something, whatever. But it became the thing. So that was the style, and you just had to kind of work out that style.
Yeah.
But I also changed the industry when, because it was hiring new people to do this stuff. And it became, why don't we hire painters? I'll teach them how to use Photoshop, and then,
Mhm.
you can have them have more control over the work. And that's where, guys I brought in from, Richard Izanov, Steve Furkow, all these guys that were trained artists. And at a certain point, guides kind of went away as a result, because you would just go.
Is this during the period where you were a VP of Creative Affairs? Is that
Yeah, but we were kind of heading that way anyway. Because
okay?
when we split off from Wildstorm and stuff, Joe stayed down there. So I was doing
Gotcha.
guides. Nathan Cabrera was doing some guides. But eventually it became, yeah, I mean, these guys were painters. They don't need it, The only time it was
That's
kind of
incredible.
necessary is when you were like on really like a crazed deadline, maybe for consistency's sake,
Sure,
so everyone could see on the same page. Kind of, okay, that's kind of how it's supposed to. Okay, that's the color for that. Okay,
I can do that
um,
quickly. Right.
but
Yeah.
most, but now, but that was also the difference was too back then was it was so expensive to have a machine that could actually color a comic book. And that's where the Codbear system had an advantage, was Steve could set up a studio with 10 guys for a much less cost than if someone did the same thing for an Apple-based studio back then. Because I remember Top Cow was like, we were going to buy, because we were working with the computers that were there, and they were going to get me my computer, right? And I was a PC
Mm-hmm.
guy, and I was like, no, the PC can do it. PC can do it. I had a 486 DX50. It was the fastest, personal computer you can get on the planet. You put it
Uh-huh.
down there, and da da da, and it was just choking, because back then Windows was just God, it could have been 8-bit, but maybe 16. I'll say 16, and Apple was 32, and it was just
Yeah.
worked better. But to get the top of the line Apple, which is what we did for Top Cow, uh, it was $10,000 at the time. There would not have been a lot of independent colorists in 1993.
No, I could
It
afford a ten
wasn't, and
thousand dollar
it
machine
really,
and just
it
work out
really
of their
almost
house.
wasn't. It really wasn't almost until um, there was that period when Steve Jobs left Apple, and they started doing Apple clones, which are then these
Mm-hmm.
affordable, basically Mac-based things, and that enabled a lot of people to start as independent colorists stuff, because they could, for then $2,000, get a machine that could do it, you know. But before that, you kind of needed to be working at a company to color comics on the computer.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. And now, now most of comics is really just run off of an entire freelance network. Like
Yeah,
very few people work for companies unless they're executives.
yeah. But
That's
it's
really fascinating.
the bad part about it is, when I talk to people, it's having that studio with all that
Yeah,
talent in it. I
yeah,
mean, I wouldn't be the painter I am today without working with Joe.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
there was
I believe
so
it.
much to learn from all these guys, and smart things too. Like there was a class I wanted to do at San Diego, but I didn't do it this year because I picked something else. It was going to be elements of style, and it was about how, as a comic book artist, it's very important for you to have something that looks different from somebody else and is consistent and da 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 da. And going through how people, like, I remember, you know, Jeff Campbell was very, very, very watchful. It's like, okay, I'm going to practice my hair, my hair, my hair until this is the style that my hair is. And my style that my hair
Yeah,
is different than the other guy's style of his hair. Okay. This is my
yeah.
anatomy, and it's different than somebody else's anatomy. If you go back to like how people break down these and create who they are, and a lot of it's hodgepodge stuff. So I had a talk with Silvestri, if you've seen Silvestri's more modern work, it's this, hatch, really detailed hatch stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
go, Mark, what brought on that? Because he was more or less, you know, he was a very good comic penciler, but it was like, it was, it wasn't, it was, oh, that looks really pretty. Is that Mark or is that Jim? I'm not sure, kind of thing, to a certain
Right.
degree. And then Mark went this way, where it's like, now it's awesome. But it's like, it was Mark taking it from Franklin Booth, who was a world-class illustrator, old school back in the
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
etcher. And so he took that, put his own spin on it, and we talked more about it. If you look at some of the way he's even working panels, when he starts doing grads around it, the grads are sculpted to fit any action lines. So he's not doing action lines anymore. He's now doing a hatch that calls direction to different parts of the panel. So there's all these thoughts that go into this stuff, and the other people Bill Sienkiewicz wouldn't be Bill Sienkiewicz without Neil Adams and Bob Peak, the famous movie illustrator. He's a fusion of those things, and putting his own thing on top of that.
But he really needs that. What you're saying, I guess, what you're saying is that you really
have to look to the past.
You have to look to the past, but you also need to have that sort of narration, not narration. What am I looking for? That kind of instruction of this is what I'm doing and this is why, right? Talking about that studio system, right?
Yes, that was. I remember. The two other best teachers I ever had in this industry were Todd and Greg Capullo, and Todd actually knows more about all this stuff and how it works better than I think any of the other image owners, because I've dealt with all of them, and they can tell you to do how they do what they do and why they do it. They can't tell you how to do somebody else's thing. Todd can tell you how to do everybody's stuff. I mean, Todd just does his stuff that he does because that's what he does. But Todd can talk to you about hyperrealism to cartoony to everything, and why that works and why that doesn't work and stuff. He doesn't always follow those rules himself, but he can tell you, how to do them. We had, every time when I started on Spawn in issue 45, when I was done with the book, we went over every single page.
Really?
Yes.
You and he would go over every page.
I was down on the Spawn movie set going over an issue with Todd.
How many issues of Spawn did you do? Comic Vine says 131 in one form or another. Does that sound right?
I think it's more like 150 something.
That's covers or interiors, or I think you've
I had the run when I was penciling and inking it with David Hine, and then I wrote 2 issues of Curse of the Spawn. There could be a cool new Spawn thing that's actually non-Spawn related sci-fi thing that might be coming out with me and the McFarlanes.
Soonish.
We'll see.
Okay.
But no, we're still close and all that kind of stuff. But after there's Greg, Todd, and Tom Orzinkowski, those are the only 3 that have ever done more issues of Spawn than me.
All right. Well, and I would assume at the very least Todd was. So I think I'm having a hard time visualizing the path here, because I mean, between you get started 93. Witchblade is 95, and I want to deal with Witchblade here for a minute. But talk me through, because which comes first? You land into the Homage Studios, you're there for a minute. How does that? What's next after that?
So we, the tragedy of the image owners is, if they really united, they would have, they were offered Marvel, they were offered all kinds of things that
Sure.
And there was too much hyper ambition, I guess, between them. And so
too much competition,
stealing talent left and right, and it's like, we were going to go with them to the La Jolla offices that they were building originally, but it became so caustic. And Mark really kind of did have his eyes set more on Hollywood stuff anyway. Um, we moved up to the Third Street Promenade in Santa Monica again, which is just again the two ludicrous places, right? This is how much money was in freaking comic books, right? It's like Jim had 2 stories on an ocean view La
Oh,
Jolla building.
it's such a beautiful office. It was, I mean, even by the time I saw it in like, well, I don't know, like early aughts, it was
Yeah,
still incredible. I can only
yeah,
imagine back in the day.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
some of the most expensive real estate on the face of the planet. And then we were in this cool hip area of Santa Monica, same sort of thing, but not as
Third
big.
Street Promenade. Yep. Yep.
Um, there was there was cash going around. But the
Yeah.
other advantage too, the thing that Mark had um, was the ability to bring in talent and the ability to let them wait until ready. Because when I was first there
Mm.
at Top Cow in San Diego in at the Homage place, Joe Benitez was there. He'd come in and draw every day. He did not have a book to do. Mark would go in and coach him and da 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 da, and you know, go and draw some more. Same thing with Dave Finch, Billy Tan. All these in one until it's ready. We had a farm club. There was a condo that they could
Yeah.
stay in. Where they were,
Wow.
and that doesn't exist in comics. And still, most of those people who came up that way are still top of the pyramid. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
true.
it just kind of blows me away that people. There's so many of these things that people see them done right and don't do them again. It's like, and I'll say the
Yeah.
same thing for working with Jimmy and Joe when we started Marvel Knights. It's like, okay, we're going to get these guys who know how to run indie books really well, right? And they're going to pick the best talent that there is and do these Marvel characters who are withering on the vine. Never
And
been
here
done
we are.
again. Never been done again.
You
Like
know, it's funny you talk about that farm system.
the companies really need to be broken up like movie and television studios. There need to be producers, quote unquote, who are
Sure.
also writer, artists, guys,
Uh-huh.
and gals, whatever. And like, okay, you guys have the Batman books. You guys have the Superman books. You guys, and it would give the spirit also of competition that because everyone's going to want their book to do better than the other one as well.
Yeah.
And take
Yeah.
total weight off DC and Marvel proper. But anyway,
That would be interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it
That's
just
a
blows me away that people don't learn from the past. It's all the answers are in the past.
Well, I can tell you that I had a conversation with Philip Sablick on this show, and Philip brought me into Top Cow, and this was again early aughts, or late aughts, something like that, 2010, 9 or 10. And I was talking to him about how I was so incredibly frustrated with the pit, right? Because there was, Mark had maintained this group of artists that came in, and some of them were just guys that were hanging out and like working on their own stuff, and they would bring in brand new people and teach them up. Chris Johnson, who just finished an Image book, came out of that era. And it was so frustrating being somebody on the other side of the room because it really wasn't that big of an office. I just happened to have a door
Was this when
where,
you guys were near Century City?
yeah,
Was it those offices? Yeah.
yeah, those offices, and uh, and being so frustrated that everything is running late. Everything was late, all the time. Everything was late, and there was nothing we could do to get them to just draw the goddamn pages. And I just didn't understand it. Didn't make any sense to me. Just draw the goddamn page. Stop playing video games and draw the goddamn
Well,
pages.
I'll give you the side story for that. So
Okay.
Brandon Peterson, when he got hired to manage that stuff at CrossGen, Brandon was
Mm.
horrible to work with when we were at Top Cow. He was just a pill and a half and just a pain, right? And and then he did the CrossGen thing, and he had the same realization that you just had. And After that, he went around to apologize to everybody they worked with previously. It's like, I didn't understand. I understand now. I'm so sorry. And he's a dear guy,
Well,
a dear guy. I love Brandon, and Brandon's super talented too. But yeah,
Philip
the
Sablik.
realization until he was in that seat.
Yeah, yeah. Just you only get paid when you turn the page in. Go get paid. Anyway,
That's why it worked very well for my coloring studio, because of
yeah.
my abilities. I could pitch in if needed, or if a book wasn't quite up to
Yeah,
snuff, I could go
yeah,
over the whole thing, and it
yeah.
gave a certain amount of confidence and stuff to Marvel, to knowing that okay. And there were two occasionals that they were like handing me some other studio saying, please, 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 could you just make this look better for us, please, please, please.
Well, to his credit, Philip Sablik, very wise man, said that the
Yes.
problem was not Mark, it was not the guys in the pit. The problem was us. It was our expectations of what was, that Mark had developed the system that he wanted. It was the system under which he works the best, and it was really us that really needed the head shift. So it's a big moment for me. It was very strange. Tell me
Yeah,
about
I'll argue that's more of a 50-50 thing, but okay.
Good. I'm glad. I'll put you two in the room. That's good. Tell me about Witchblade. So right around 95,
Mhm.
David Wall, Michael Turner, and yourself.
Yep.
This has been a big character. Can you talk to
Yeah.
me about how this comes together?
So the top books at the time were She and Lady Death.
Right.
And we were like, we were kind of definitely riding high at that point at Top Cow. People were really liking the quality of the stuff we were putting out. And Mike and I had just done our first book together, the Ballistic Wetworks crossover, where Mike,
Mm-hmm.
it was the first time that Mike really kind of got to get out on his own and did pages that were just undeniably, oh my God, what is this? Mike also, to give again a couple props to Mike and for any other aspiring artist, Mike was a guy who was a freaking sponge. Mike liked me being around the older fart who knew all the cool older comic things and Asian comic artists, and I would show him this is Zamano stuff. This is this, and he would
Yeah.
just suck it in and just make himself better. But that's the thing. But it's also because Mike used to be a competitive kickboxer before
Okay.
comics. And so it also
Okay.
helps that anyone who's ever done like athletics and done any kind of training before, you have to really kind of, put that on. It's like when I first started, what got me into, I was always the kid from when I was the littlest kid to whatever, that was the kid that you had draw things in class for you, right? Always,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And, never really worked at it at that point, just, drew and did stuff. And there was one of the very first D&D clubs in La Crescenta. It was called the War Club. And I remember my
Okay.
big brother took me down to this place and met friends that are still my best friends from then, and stuff, role playing games. And there was a guy, Kevin Holguin, Brian Holguin's older brother, and he did a painting of his space RGB group of people. Like, oh, well, I draw too, and I went away and I did a drawing, and he came back. He goes, that sucks. And so what did I do? What I did was I would go in the study room. This was a high school, right? This is sophomore high school probably. Um, at lunch, I would go into the study room and have an anatomy book. And today I'm drawing arms and arms and arms and arms and arms and arms and arms.
Right.
Next day, I'm drawing feet and feet and feet and feet and feet and feet and feet. Drawing da 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 da. Within 2 weeks, I was better than Kevin. Uh, in a month, Kevin stopped drawing and painting entirely.
Take that, Kevin.
but the point of that isn't so much revenge in it, because it's not like I wanted him to stop drawing
Yeah.
or whatever.
Or
Well,
thank you, Kevin.
there
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
certain, whatever. But it just, and I think it's for anyone who's been an athlete and lifted weights before and sees
Yeah.
the changes that because then it's like obvious, like, oh,
Yeah.
I can curl 45s now. I could never curl a 45 before. So it shows that you can go beyond. And there's so many
Right.
people who just they get so stuck.
Yeah, yeah, that is interesting, and I think it's uh, there's often been talk about especially those early image guys, and especially the partners, right? Some of them have really kind of locked into a style and have never really much left it, and when they have tried, there's stumbling. I'm sure you probably know who I'm talking about, and some of them, like Todd and like Jim, like they just continually, seemingly refine, like it never quite,
Well, but there
you
was
know.
a moment with Jim when he tried to get out because he wanted to get out of his style. And that's when
Yeah,
he moved into, he started doing his Death Below thing. And
yeah,
I was there at the studio when Frank Miller
yeah.
called him up and said, "Stop ripping off my style." And he did. But
Yeah,
I think he felt trapped. I think he wanted to be able to explore other styles. And then
yeah,
he just turned into the spin. He just like Hush came out and it's like, I'm just going to be the most Jim Lee I can possibly be.
yes. I'm just going to refine. I'm going to become the
Yeah.
purest
Yes.
Jim Lee
Yes.
there is.
Yes.
Yeah,
But he tried to get out of his thing. He tried.
that's interesting. I wonder. I mean, you talk about Todd understanding all of those styles and can talk about those styles. Does you think he has that? I mean, you probably know him as well creatively as well as anybody. Do you feel like he has that mechanical ability to shift that? Like, could he do like a I don't know, like the artistic equivalent of an impersonation of someone else's style?
Yes. But he'd have to be, looking at reference and be very disciplined about it. Because, I mean, he's got his thing, and
Yeah,
it works the way it works. And he's been doing it for a very, 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 very long time. And that's always the problem because on this new project, I'm trying to carefully steer an artist style a little bit, but I know better than, and I won't name the artist. It was a Top Cow artist. It was going to be one of my first indie books that we're
uh-huh.
doing. And he was like a bad Mark clone at the time. And I
Okay.
said, well, if we just go a little bit more European with your line and stop doing all the hatching inside, just let's do contours and the coloring will handle that stuff. And while I had my foot on his throat, that was okay. But it always kind of comes back to Mama for your original style, unless you were just a real chameleon. I think that's what also has benefited me because when I first started, I've been a professional illustrator since I was 18. So I've worked on magazine covers, on old computer game console crap, and that's all Prismacolor and acrylic and all that kind of stuff. But our directors say, do this like this, do this
Yeah.
now like this cartoon. So I had to be able to do any style. That's because that's what you had to do as an illustrator.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. Okay, so right about this time, we're talking about late 90s. We're starting to get into some of your more entrepreneurial efforts, right? We're looking
Yep.
at Haberlin Studios,
So
Avalon Studios.
yeah. So and we Avalon as a publishing company, that was Will Spartasio and myself to
Okay.
start. Um, but also so when I left Top, so go back to the other question we didn't finish. So
Witchblade. Yes, okay. Let's go back to Witchblade.
so Sideblade, so we thought, with our hubris, was we can do it better than they did. Let's do our competitor, for that stuff.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
brought in, because it was I took pictures recently of the restaurant that David Wall and I first started mapping it out is still on the Santa Monica Pier, in some place, and it was us sitting down and me putting on my TV development hat. Let's give her a day job, and let's, always hearkening back to, I always loved, uh, uh, Michael Moorcock's work. And essentially, the
Yeah.
Witchblade is an eternal champion's weapon.
Oh yeah. I can
I
see
always thought it
that.
was I
Yeah.
always thought it was funny. There was some panel before it launched a few years ago, and I muscled myself into the panel. It was a Top Cow panel, and and Matt was on the end, and Matt Hawkins was on the end. He's like, and yeah, and Brian, and I've always heard that the Witchblade is Excalibur, and I go, Matt, it's Stormbringer. It's not Excalibur. This is
Elric, not Arthur. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
But David and I went off running. Then we brought in Mike and Mark, and went around with all the names and stuff,
yeah.
all the possible names. Initially, she was going to be Sarah Lopez at one point instead of Sarah Pizzini. She was going to be a firewoman, not a detective, in our first kind of running through it. But then we figured, detective's a lot better for additional storylines and other shit. So
yeah. You can, always a crime of the week. Yeah.
Let's do detective. And then we thought, it was at a time when it was like, it seemed like you could do that sort of launching with other things. So we Battle of Independence, she and Cyblade, who was our lead female character at the time. I don't know where Cyblade is now, but anyway.
Yeah.
And Billy did one,
about Battle of the
and we did one.
Yeah.
And it got pimped the shit out of. And I want to say even then we sold like 250,000 copies. I want to say at least. It probably was more. Probably did bunches of whatever. And that's what enabled us to get the launching pad for Witchblade, because that's where we introduced Witchblade inside of that.
Gotcha.
And then it was Michael. Gotcha. I left early. It was, Michael hitting on all cylinders, and David, and there you go.
There you go.
So then I left because I was, I was butting heads with our head of business affairs, Brad Foxhoven. He was always kind of undoing shit that I was putting together and doing other shit. And it was just, I was about to have my first child, and I was the fruit you couldn't get because I was at Top Cow. Everybody wanted me to color their books and whatever. That's one of the reasons why Billy did the She thing with us. So I would color She. That's how big a deal it was for me as a colorist coloring someone else. And Jimmy and Joe were always knocking on my door, and we did that issue 25 of Spawn when we all swapped books, and Todd was a fan, and so it was like, I don't need the pain of coming in and dealing with you,
right.
And I think I'm gonna be moving on. And that's when I started the coloring studio, and Todd was the first client, and then Jimmy and Joe took me out to strip clubs in New York to try and get me to do all the Marvel Knights books. Just color them all. It's like, Jimmy, I can't color all your books. and then and then hiring more people, and I had a great, the Kemp brothers and Laura Martin worked with me for a little bit, Justin Palmser, all these people who eventually, there was a big chunk of my people when I had the bigger studio who then went to the Florida one I mentioned earlier that Brandon went to. What's the name of that company? CrossGen.
Yeah.
Because they're like, I remember Laura coming into my house and like going, they've offered me like $50,000 a year. There was like no set number of pages I needed to do, and they did healthcare. I go, God bless, go take it while you can take it.
Go
Yeah,
to Florida. It won't last forever.
take
Yeah.
it while you can take
Yeah.
it. Because I've seen it come and go. So anyway,
But
so
that is
then
interesting. Just to put a can I
yeah.
just double tap there?
Yeah.
CrossGen, one of the conceits of CrossGen was the running towards the studio system that you're talking about. Like
Mhm.
they wanted to get everyone under the same roof and really have everybody show up to work at a desk. Like
Yeah.
that, it seems like that's the other end of that spectrum from where we are now. And
Yeah, but from what
and
I
it didn't do
understand,
didn't do well.
yeah, it didn't gel the same way. So again,
Yeah.
maybe you can't, right time, right place, yada yada.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Anyway,
Um,
I'm sorry. I derailed you
so
there for a
anyway,
second.
so then again, like we were talking about, it was before I was ready to pencil and ink. There's no way I would have been fast enough, and
Yeah.
and books were becoming pains, and the coloring studio stuff was doing so well for me at the time. I
Yeah.
just let Avalon go, but we had a bunch of fun stuff coming. I mean, we had Stone, that was the number one independent book of 1998 when it came out. Aria came out, and it was the second highest selling book in the United States. The only thing that beat it was X-Men, because X-Men was hot at the time, I guess.
Yeah.
Wicked did very well for us. Athena Inc. We did. Uh, People forget MREX, which was Duncan Rouleau, Joe Kelly.
Oh yeah.
That became
Yeah, I remember
Generator
that.
X, which was a short-run
Yeah.
television animated
Mm-hmm.
show. Um, and
And
then
so much, actually, I think about it now, like so much of the what do they call themselves? That group, that Man of Action. So much of
yep,
that,
Man of
like
Action.
that MREX ended up being a little bit in that DNA of everything, like the Ben 10 and all of that. Anyway,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then we had I did my Houdini graphic novel back then. That came out through Image. That is
Mm-hmm.
now, I co-wrote the screenplay with Nick Vallelonga, who got the Golden Globe and Academy Award for The Green Book. And it's getting a lot of attention. I can't say who it is. We had a major star attach themselves to it on Friday. So knock on
I've
wood.
heard the name. It was just before we started recording, and wow, I'm so thrilled for you. It's incredible.
And
Yeah.
then again, and when I finish the next one, I'll go back to why this is important, I think. And then we are pretty much, I think right here is my to sign agreement. Let me see. Yeah. The Nine Rings of the Wu-Tang,
Yeah.
an adult
Section Egg.
animated series with Sony. Uh, and
Look
that
at
basically,
that.
think of it as this epic kung fu meets Lord of the Rings fantasy. We've
It's
got
time for that.
Josh
It is so time for
Pavlo
that.
as one of our writers we put together on it. Josh was Emmy nominated for Afro Samurai, has written tons of shows. Uh, we got Earl Herbert, who is one of the directors on Blue Eyed Samurai.
Right on.
And
Yeah.
then it's myself, RZA, and Aaron Bullock are the co-creators on it. And that was from the 90s. So the reason why I'm bringing it up
Yeah.
is I think it's vitally important for people to have their own creations.
Yeah. Yeah.
That something that you have done, you can sit back wherever. I mean, these are both things that were done at the end of the 90s. And now they're in a position to make me a significant amount of money. You did a
Sure.
great run on Spider-Man in the 90s. Unless you still had the original art to sell, you're getting a thank you at the end of a Marvel movie that they made $1 billion on.
That's very true.
Spend the time to make your own stuff. And I forgot when I was editor in chief for McFarlane, I was helping Todd and Robert staff the Hunt book when it was starting their co-property. And it was when Marvel and DC had these huge exclusivity wars going. And so I'd be calling up people and go, oh, would you like to? Oh, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to do that book. When are you available? 3 years from now. Yeah, that's not really gonna work. But I'd be in these meetings where we'd bring people in, and Todd and Robert, would be talking, and Todd would be going, yeah, but you don't want to be known for doing Stan and Jack's characters. You want to be known for doing your own characters, And Robert would chime in on the same thing. And this was, after a few years I'd been there, and it's like I was sitting in the back there. I used to do my own characters. I think I have to be leaving. And that's when I left. And Marvel made it clear that I could do anything I wanted there, including creating and everything. So I figured I'd do a Marvel book would be the one that would pay the thing, and then I do my creator-owned book at Image, right? So one would pay the bills for the other one.
One for them, one for me.
Yeah, and then I got hit up by Skip Brittenham, who's a huge entertainment attorney. Still, is huge. His clients are all kinds of the most giganto people that there are in anything. And he had an idea for a graphic novel. And I thought, okay, well, this would be another way to pay his bills. Custom comics, when you're doing your own comic company, custom comics, which is, if you don't know what a custom comic is, let's say, here's an example of one. Back in the 90s, I did a line of comics for Stan Winston, the big special effects creature maker and stuff. Mm-hmm. And you get to charge a lot of money because you're handling everything for them. And they're a good revenue source for stuff. Yeah. So I figured, this thing with Skip, because whenever you get hit up by entertainment people, it's always we want to make this into a movie. They don't really care about the comics and stuff.
Yeah.
Skip's comic collection was larger than mine. He wanted to do all these cool things. The first thing, of course, was Anomaly, which is this landscape augmented reality graphic novel, the longest original full color graphic novel ever done. It just became, I get to be a kid in the playground and trials, because I went in there when we were first starting. I had all these, P&Ls and all this stuff set up because we were going to start the company. And it's like, I'm like, okay, it's like, so we'll do a certain amount of license things. Cause again, that's one of the building blocks for making money for your company, right? So license company, do a couple, whatever, a couple custom comics, and then do da-da-da-da-da. And he was like, I'm just more interested in doing cool shit. Threw up all the pages. It's okay. So we'll focus on doing cool shit. But that was funny because that was also a little bit my start at Image, because it was like no one was fast doing what I was doing digitally back then. And Mark was like, it will be ready when it's ready. Eventually it became the situation where we were flying SideQuest drives up to Canada. But that's your point. It's ready when it's ready, unless I'm going to lose $200,000.
In which case, it's ready. It's ready.
It's freaking ready.
There's this old what is it? I won't even say it was. I can't remember the classic artist who said the art is never completed; it's only abandoned. Yeah, sometimes you just abandon it because $200,000. Go.
Well, and some of the best advice I ever had on that was, like, I remember John Byrne saying, and John, I mean, the people who are just, I have to show young talent because they just don't understand. It's like, John Buscema, John Byrne, I guess you had to be a John, could do 2.5 books a month. And they were fully rendered. They weren't. It's funny because if you see the difference between their work and again, I love Mark, but Mark would quite often give Dan Green essentially what I would call breakdowns. Not full pencils and stuff like that. That's not how he works now, but that was Marvel, and plus the times were faster and blah blah blah. But guys who are that fast is just. I don't think there's anybody that fast. I mean, I'm that fast in my process, but there's no way. If I could do everything that I do digitally, but it would take me a lot longer to do it.
Yeah. No, I can see that. This is actually, it kind of jumps outside the narrative, but this is a good opportunity for us to talk about your work as a fine artist. right?
Yep.
I'm seeing this painting up above your right shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
You give me some pitch me Brian Haberlin, the fine artist, for a moment, because I've been a fan of you. I mean, I have one of your early paintings that you were doing to warm up each day. I've got in our hallway here, and it's been one of our favorites for a very long time. But
Thanks.
tell me about that process. How did you go from being comics entrepreneur, digital, technologist, all of those things, to going back and grabbing a paintbrush and having the second,
Well, but
third,
that's
eighth career now? Yeah.
but that's also the thing. It's like, I do I do everything.
Yeah.
I'll start sculpting something. I'll start. Because I was brought up before any of this shit was digital. And it's always, frankly, it's more fun to get your hands dirty. I even
Yeah.
often when I'll do too, if I'm working digitally and have like a base, print it out, paint over it. It's like back and forth, scan it back in, adjust some color. Da 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 da. It's like go 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 every way with it. There's no reason not to. Uh, and so I always have kind of thought of fine art a little bit as my retirement job to a degree.
Okay. Okay.
And if you look
Yeah.
at, I don't know if I can turn this so you can see them. I doubt you can see them, but we can see. There's a bottom corner there by my gym thing. Uh,
Uh-huh.
you see all those magazines that are sitting in that bottom thing? There's probably like 100 of those magazines. Those
Yeah,
are
sure.
all fine art uh, collector um, books that go through. So I've always been paying attention for the last 20 years, the fine art market. And it was really
Okay.
interesting too back in those. Uh, they used to, and they stopped doing it because I knew the galleries didn't like it. They'd have like, this is the artist, and he's going to show whatever, and they would have a breakdown of the value of their pieces over the years, and also a breakdown as far as small, medium, and large, and you could see how the money worked.
Really?
You know,
Well, that's
and
cool.
so I started doing the stuff and posting it and yada yada, yada, and have a site where I sell stuff and sell the prints and stuff. And last year on my Instagram, I got, how the messages on Instagram go. There's like the general whatever, and the ones you have to accept, and then there's the ones that are probably spam kind of thing. And anyway,
Sure.
his message was in the spam thing for about a month or so, and he has no followers. He's not following anybody, because he can't, because he's a big gallery owner and stuff. And he reached out. He goes, "I really like your work." Da 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 da. And this is a gallery that I've been following for 20 years.
So
I know
immediately.
I know a few people. They're considered one of the best, especially for figurative work like I do. So they reached out to me, and they had me in their group show 5 under 5. So it was 5 pieces under $5,000 each. Last not this last August, the August the year before. So that was my very first thing, and then that did well, and then through him we did the earlier this year the LA art show, and my stuff kind of blew up there. I was kind of the talk of the place. And then there's an art show that I've been going to ever since I was a little kid, because Laguna Beach is down here in Southern California. And my parents used to have a friend who had a house there, so every kids would go down there, and there's this Pageant of the Masters, Fine Arts Festival, Sawdust Festival. They're there every year, and it's like, that'd be fun to try and get in. It's like let's try that. So I got into that, and so that was funny because it was an outdoor show that was for 2 months. So I was like, wait a second, no, I just set up a pop-up banner and a table, and what are you talking about? I had to build a booth, I had to do all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I got out of that, I got, the cover of Fine Art Collector magazine, which is a big deal. Beautiful Bazaar, I'm going to do a show with them in November in San Francisco. It's just a one-person show. But the other thing that was kind of blew up that was funny. So I told you about that five under five show. So I
Mm-hmm.
was doing the Laguna Beach show at the same time that show was starting up, and I told Steve, the gallery owner, I was like, Steve, it's like I got a bunch of pieces, why don't I just send you a whole bunch and then you can figure out which ones are going to go on the show. And they have a moratorium on don't post any of these pieces until 2 weeks before the show. And so 2 weeks came around and I go, look, so which pieces are you picking for the show? And it's like all of them. It's like, but everybody else has 5 or less pieces and I have 15. He's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they sold 13 the opening night, and then the other
Damn.
2 went too. So that's all going very well.
Yeah, it sounds like. Well, congratulations. Does this mean you're retiring? Is that what you just?
No, we have. So we have here. I'll show you a couple things real quick. Let's see what we got here. So we got boom. Get rid of that. Okay. Am I sharing my window? I am sharing my window. There we go. So This is a page from Creative Creature Catcher 2.
Okay.
That will be out next year. That was our very successful AR children's book. And this is the second one. And if anybody knows anybody at Meta, we're trying to get in with them for the glasses thing right now. So please let us know. Which I think would just be perfect for them. But this is Jared Van Dyke's paints. I'm doing the words. He also did the artwork on the other one. So it's basically it's the theme of this one is the Society of Creative Creature Catchers needs your help. You're curious, you're smart, you're fun, need your help because they find an egg. They don't know whose egg it is, and they have to go around to all the creatures' worlds with you along board to help find its mother, find its family. So we got that. Let's see. Got that. This is Love Inc. Okay. 2 Rival Cupids. It's a rom-com anthology based around these two. The one is very pris and perm, and the other one is more fuck this shit.
Got it. That's fun.
They don't necessarily get along. And then what else do I got here? Well, that's that other stuff you saw. Is that it? And then the other thing is David Hine and I are working on a graphic novel, Magus. It's basically the premise is the next from 2030 to 2040 something will be referred to in the future as the Troubles, and beyond the Irish references. Everything that can go wrong goes wrong with humanity. Weather, viruses, wars, everything. We're almost on the teetering brink. And this woman develops at the end of the 40s the first fully functional quantum computer. And with the James Webb Telescope, the quantum computer discovers that now that we have these hyperaccurate telescopes, with that data information, it can make astrology work. So everybody gets their daily horoscopes in the future. So we jump ahead 100 years. It's sort of a utopian, dystopian sort of thing. Everybody has a certain color to denote what their sign is. You get your daily horoscope. Everything's been running great for the world. There's some little tiny hiccupy things, but generally we were almost gone, and now everything kind of works. And eventually what happens is we have a murder mystery going on with this guy who's supposed to be the new sage. The sage is the person that interfaces directly with the quantum computer and is the only one who does that. And it turns out the guy who's going to be the replacement is murdered. But we also find out that he had a twin sister, but illegally the twin sister was saved and wasn't supposed to survive. So they were both born in different astrological groups. One after midnight, one before. One's the shitty, crappy one. One's the really good one. and the shitty, crappy one now has to try and solve her brother's murder. And eventually, you find out if so I'm going to say spoilers. Okay, spoilers.
Yeah.
So spoilers is what eventually we find out is astrology never worked. The quantum computer is so good at predictive technology. If it can get enough people following its lead with its stuff, then
It can
mankind's
guide
safe
them.
for it. But it realizes that it's stagnated mankind's progression, and it wants to commit suicide. And the only one that can do that is the sister of the woman who's
Incredible. Well, I'm looking forward to that. But this is actually a really good transition. That pitch is a really fantastic transition to, when we're starting to think about the research behind an interview, we put up a post and say, what would you ask this person, right? And I will say that far and away, the question that people wanted to know from you is, what is the future? What future do you see for comics? Or rather, how do you see comics and generative AI working together? Or not? Is it antithetical? What are your thoughts on that?
well, people should think about how I kind of got into it. So I've always been the what's the new thing? What's the new thing? What's the new thing? What's the new thing?
Right.
And quite often you get flack for that. Even going back to when I first started using an airbrush, it's like, and the computer was a whole nother thing, and da 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 da. And you have to understand that I've always been on the edge of all this stuff, from early algorithms to all this kind of stuff. And in 2018, I was a guest of the South Korean government at a big academic conference, and there was the woman who was the lead woman. She was a curator of a museum in London, lead AI person, and they were like bad filters, and and when I was messing with it, it was like it's bad filters, but there's some interesting things there, and I can paint and fix the rest of it, So there was like, since I was like working so much to fix it and stuff when I was first kind of using it, I thought it's just a tool, right? It's a filter, just like any other filter, right? And then everyone's kind of going, no, there's this aspect to it, there's this aspect to it, there's this aspect to it. And I'm like, okay, I'm out. I don't need to do it because I don't need to do it. Go back to my old style
fully
that I've
capable.
2,700 pages with, and da 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 da. And I understand the trepidation, So I mean, I'm not going to use something that's going to make people freak out. The only problem is then I have to convince people. It's like, oh well, everything he does is AI. But it's like, well, look back at the career that I had. And the awards I've won before, but that's okay, whatever. But that's also that. See, that's the sad part, though. I think for a lot, there's a lot of I have to prove I'm not a witch thing with guys who are like, I mean, Liam Sharp had that thrown at him, that his paintings. It's like people just have to be kind of more, just vote with your shoes. It's like, don't buy what they do. It's like, but I think there is something to be as like, like in Photoshop, if I have an image that I have the wrong thing and I extend it over a little bit, that's generative AI. Is that bad? Is that good? Is that okay? It's like, I think there's just too much we have to see. There's too much legislation that still needs to be kind of set up on it. There's just, right. It's like, so I just, again, I used it when it couldn't do faces and arms and shit like that. It's like, oh, the pattern's kind of cool, but and then, not done after, whatever. Am I always keeping an eye on it? You bet I am, because I'm never going to not keep an eye on whatever's new and stuff. But, why do I want to have a whole bunch of people pissed off at me to do art? That doesn't sound like fun.
No,
and then that's just another excuse for me to do more of my handwork.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's obvious. I mean, that's part of why I wanted to talk about your fine.
I think it's somewhere along the line there's going to be the clear line of like tool, not tool, but there's always going to be people who are, there's still the people who are like, oh my God, someone used reference for that painting, and then it's like, yeah, so did Norman Rockwell, Frank Frazetta. Anyway. Artists
always have,
So I don't. I mean, I see it doing a lot more things in other mediums because I think there's also the notion that comics has always been. I'm one of the few guys who does works the way I work. I mean, Mike Diodato works that way too. Joe Quesada uses a lot of 3D in the backgrounds of his. A lot of these guys. I mean, there was a 3D repository at Marvel in the 2000s that
Huh.
you could pull up. I have the whole helicarrier designed inside and out with post-its on monitors and all that kind of stuff. I have Peter Parker's apartment again with post-its to the level that post-its are on the thing that Joe had made up. So it's always there, but it's just right now there's a lot of gray areas. You know, like
Yeah.
I think it's really wrong when it's like, I mean, here's an example of wrong. Okay, the wrong use of it is Kim Jong Gi. You know who he is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
He passed
leader
away
of
a
North. Yeah.
couple of years ago, and 2 days after he died, somebody put out a checkpoint with his style because
Okay.
we both know what's eventually going to happen is there will be, because it's already happened with voice actors, right? Like I have an app on my phone that if I'm busy, like if I'm driving up to LA and I need to read a script or something, it will read it
Yeah.
in voice, and it has deals with Gwyneth Paltrow is one of the voices because she made a
Right.
deal with them to do her voice, and that's going to happen at all levels of the game. Whether it's even like, I mean, again, you can totally see in movies. It's like, yeah, that was really cool. Can I see it with Harrison Ford now?
Yeah. Would
You know,
you would you sell the license to your style?
I see. I don't think I have a style yet. I really don't. People say I do, but I don't think I do. I that's what I'm aspiring to. I can do
Right.
pretty. I can certainly do pretty.
Okay.
Um, but I don't feel that right now I have that. Oh my God, that's a Haberlin. You know. And would I eventually do that? I don't know.
Do
Don't
you
think
think that's
so, but I
something
don't
that
know. But that
one of
will
the
be happening.
questions?
That will absolutely be happening.
Yeah.
Because that could, well, I I say it could be happening. It might not happen. I mean, depending on how some of these legal arguments and stuff go.
Yeah.
Because yeah, yeah, it's just it's yeah, it's our legislators don't understand the technology, um, and there's so much money flying around. I think it's going to be some time before stuff kind of lands one way or other. But again, for
Is
comics,
there
I'm back to my old ways.
is there a is there a corollary in our lifetimes of what a shift AI is going to bring? Is there something that we can look to, do you think, that is that gives us, like, is this the invention of the internet? Is this the invention of networked computers? Is this is this the invention of digital imaging? Like, how large is this shift?
It's
Is this the
bigger because
invention of the
it,
tractor? I mean, I don't know
yeah,
what it.
this is the wheel. This is
Dude.
the wheel. That's how much it's going to affect things because it's already everywhere. It's already. I mean, in stupid
Yeah.
programs that you think, oh, you want AI to start writing this for you now? You know, I always think it's very
Yeah.
funny to see. On Facebook there has posted. Oh, you have to tell us if it's AI or not, right? And it's like, would you like AI to help you write this post? And write flow.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't, yeah. And my big question is too, uh, do normal people care?
Right. Right.
That's the jeopardy, you know. Uh, do normal people, because let's say the U.S. does a bunch of copyright legislation that you think China and the rest of the world are gonna.
Yeah.
You saw that James Cameron just joined the board of OpenAI, right?
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah.
Not surprising.
And then Lionsgate is getting all their stuff fed into it.
I'm thinking back on our conversation here and talking about things like, the faxes back and forth of people saying you're biting my style, you're biting my style. Frank Miller calling Jim Lee and saying, stop stealing my style. Right.
Yeah.
And I think at its roots, that sort of protection of your line, of your style, is kind of the reaction to what AI is currently being used for in digital imaging, right? It is that, well, this is mine, I own this, you've stolen it and are feeding it back out to people. Is that the way to look at this? Is there a healthier, is there maybe not healthier, maybe that's not the right word. Is there a more forward thinking, a more realistic way of looking at this?
Well, I don't have an answer for any of that stuff, but I think there's ways to look at it. There is that way to look at it. There is also the way to look at it that every single artist that there's ever been has looked back at other artists and learned from them.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have to pay copyright and whatever for that.
Sure.
And that's the first thing. If I take on a job, is like, okay, we're going to do a job that's Vikings. Okay, I'm going to look at everyone's Viking work.
Yeah.
I'm not going to copy everyone's Viking, but I'm going to reference in my head. Oh, that was kind of a cool band. I want to use a band like that, or whatever. But I think it gets sticky. I think it gets sticky when it's, oh, someone just put in some words and got, or really, really, like it's a Frazetta,
Yeah.
or whatever, it's like, that's, I think, when it's bad. But I understand both sides of it. I mean, that's why I'm, kind of, I get it.
Staying out of it.
We'll see how it gets sorted out, because it will have to get sorted out at some point. But until it does, I understand why people are upset about it. I get it.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for me to, add to their complaints when I can just do it
the old way, which you exactly, which you are an expert in.
I was already ahead of the curve as it was. It was almost like when I first started. It's like sometimes I think it's like, well, maybe I was just out too much on my skis. It's like,
yeah,
it's the new thing. It's the new thing. It's the new thing. And it's like, and that's kind of been the description of me in this industry. Always pioneering, always using the new thing, and until it's like, oh, this killed babies. Oh, sorry.
I'll just put this away for a little bit. It's fine.
It's like
nothing to see here.
But again, I because where I came from, where it was just like, it was filters, and I did a ton of the work to fix it. I thought, okay, this is not a big deal, But
right.
Then people got butthurt over it, and I understand. I understand.
Yeah. Tell me, one of the questions that came up. Thank you for that, and I appreciate that this is a really delicate way for you to conversations.
Yeah, again, I don't know what the answers are, other than I totally see the complaint. I absolutely do.
Yeah.
But it's going to be up to time and other things, I think, to kind of solve it at the end of it. I mean, is it something where it is, someone does, which, again, Adobe has always claimed that their generator was based on the thing, but there's always the question of, then rights in their stock. Did all these people really sign off to do this stuff? There's nothing to stop some group to just go ahead, we are just going to train off, not copyright material, pure,
Right.
So but then is that going to be an issue too? I don't know, because part of the problem then is going to be the instant art problem, is that someone can go da 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 boom. I kind of think at the end of the day, though, that the people who are pure prompt artists are going to get bored. Or the people who, I think what most of the audience is afraid of is like everybody doing their own generative AI with their stuff and not using artists at all. I think that they're going to get bored because it's too easy. It's like, how many people decide to be professional photographers? Everyone's got a phone in their freaking pocket,
Yeah.
And that was the whole thing too with photography. It's like, oh, photography is going to end art. Didn't end art. But that was a legitimate concern at the time. Why would anybody want a painting when you could just take a picture? So I don't know what the answers are to any of this stuff, but I see whenever I've seen this kind of thing happen before, and granted this is a very different beast, where people go, oh, it's super fast, super cheap, it's whatever for us to do it. Instant gratification. It doesn't last. As a result of that, because you didn't have to train and learn and get better, you're always going to be, no matter what magic prompt you're putting in the AI, or at the end of the day, it's going to get so just put together that everyone's work kind of looks the same. That was one of the reasons I didn't go to art center when I didn't go to art school. I went to communications instead, because there was art center, one of the best art schools thing, but it was like a cookie cutter. It was like everybody came out with these portfolios that were awesome, but they all look the same.
They look the same.
It's like, I don't want to do that, But again, I don't know what the I don't think anyone knows the
I don't think we do either.
It's awesome. I mean, again, the jumps in what it can do. Just like, you like look at it and it's like what it could do 2 weeks ago, it can do something else now, and yada yada yada. You could get in the weeds as far as like just like, God, does this mean? How much unemployment is this really going to have a whole bunch of unemployment? Do we have to start thinking about a base salary now as a result of AI? That these other guys are all gonna, and then the whole thing. I don't know if it would have been different if the open AI thing stayed really kind of, oh, it's all free to everybody. I think that would still piss people off too. I don't think that makes a difference. I think that helps enrage people that they are obviously going to make a shit ton of money off this stuff.
Yeah.
And Lord knows my stocks in nuclear energy companies, they've been going up lately. So have you seen those plans? It's like Oracle's going to build their big thing. They're going to have 3 reactors.
Jesus.
And then there's a big one with Microsoft and I forget who else. $80 billion in the company. It's all going to be kind of based in Saudi Arabia, and they're going to build the nuclear reactors there too. But they get to build them faster because they don't have the regulatory things that we have in the U.S. That's all going to be good, right?
That's going to be fine. Unregulated nuclear power. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about this, kids. You're going to be all right. Oh, God. Yeah. What, today, saying to the audience just before we came on, there was some stuff there was news, global news that was, scary. We don't know where it's going to shake out. Assuming, so I'm going to put big caveats, assuming we're all still here and we're not in the middle of a global war, and assuming that that AI shakes out one way or the other, what do you think comics as an entertainment, as an art form, this art form that you've dedicated a huge chunk of your life to, what do you think it looks like 10 years from now?
It's 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 going to be vinyl. It's going to be vinyl stores. There's going to be a lot fewer of them. Uh, Everything's going to be really kind of super cool, nice design, reading ribbons, expensive, not cheap. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's going to be vinyls. It's going to be vinyl.
It's really interesting.
You
I
know,
hope you're wrong. I like
yeah,
our current model of vinyl and newsprint. I
yeah.
think that I
The
hope that we can
problem
hang
is
on to
just
that.
the economics don't match up that well anymore. For the
Yeah,
amount of entertainment value for a 4.99 comic compared to anything else you could put 4.99 towards. You know, I mean, comics were designed to be pulp. And I still remember because I think we kind of missed the boat in America when digital comics first started, right?
yeah,
And I'm torn both ways because I understand brick and mortar stores too, but I remember being one of the very first. Milt was running one of his things in New York Comic Con. Everything, it was like all the new guys who had there was a Japanese guy from I forget which one of the big publishers there. There was Hank Canales who had just started the DC one. There was whoever from Comixology and stuff. And I remember, and we were all in the audience trying to get some numbers, trying to figure out because no one knew any numbers back then and stuff. Like, oh, is this making
yeah,
money? Is this something worth doing? What is, and I remember Hank Canales was like going, yeah, if we had because the American comic book market started doing it at the same price as cover price in brick and mortar stores, to try and protect brick and mortar stores. But as a result, digital comics never took off in the United States.
yeah.
Digital comics needed to be what comics were when they started, which was pulp. They needed to be
Cheap.
near free or whatever. And there would be a different reality today in the United States if that happened. So now you got Webtoons that has about
Yeah,
170 million eyeballs. I mean, that's what the one I have up right now. That's going to be a Webtoons first. You know,
yeah.
um,
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You're right, and they did it. They did it just by going in that direction, straight into that direction. Yeah.
yeah. But I think you can play both ways though. So let's say this became a big thing on Webtoons. 10 million people have watched it and stuff. You're going to be able to sell them some books because they're going to
Right.
want to have you know the thing to have on a shelf in the real world and da 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 da. So I think you play all those things together. Again, I think that Philip did such a great job in starting Boom stuff with Berserk, that model of doing a Kickstarter that
Mm-hmm.
that funds your project, but doesn't deliver things to compete with brick and mortar because they're
Ding, ding,
getting
ding.
comics. I think that was
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah, me too. And then we talked about that during his episode. I just feel like that was one of the most innovative things that's been done in this industry in
Yep.
this decade. Yeah. Yeah. I'm continually impressed that they were able to pull that model off, and then kind of show the way for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest risk right now facing comics, the industry of comics?
That I think we lost generations of talent because
Mm,
there were other things they could do that would make more money and enable and let them have a family and put
yeah.
kids through school. And also just other things because when I started, because I like doing the fantasy and sci-fi stuff, but we're talking about 80s. So the only place that is happening for me is pulp covers, uh, and maybe some comics at that time. But then so comics was perfect, right? Oh, you get to do superhero because there were no one's doing any good movies there. There was no concept art. There was no these big whatever kind of things, right? but then games started getting more interesting, and then people started to work in those fields who would have been the next Jim Lee, the next, all this stuff.
Right.
I keep seeing it kind of aging out to a little bit of a degree, I hate to say. But I also see that I don't know if I would have stayed in comics if there wasn't, a decent amount of money to be made. I have 2 kids. I've sent 2 kids through school, and I know,
Right.
The idea of being a starving artist is not, but I've started, I think I have digital arts tutorials, so I have that company that makes money. I have the entertainment stuff. I have, so I don't just do this, but a lot of people do in comics, and I just like, man. I mean, the other problem is too is like, I don't, and I've said this before. I think that there weren't a lot of guys who passed the torch with knowledge on how to do this. Like the big two, one, they're obviously stretched as thin as possible with their people. People are editing too many books. But on the other side of that, it seems like none of them were ever taught by guys who were really good at it. And also, at neither of the two companies are any writer artists as editors, guys who've done books.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's a problem. And I've seen that
almost intentionally, function. I would say,
I would hope not, but because that's only hurts them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, again, that's going back to what was some of the most successful relaunches ever were, besides image stuff from the Image guys, Jimmy and Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah, absolutely.
But you don't have your Al Milgrams, you don't have your Denny O'Neills, you don't have, these guys who, one, can put a book back on track. They can say, okay, the artist is having trouble, silhouette the next 2 pages. They don't know how to do that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I mean, and that is, I think, especially looking at DC in particular, they, the rounds of layoffs they've had, just on my side, on the executive marketing sales side, just the amount of institutional knowledge that's gone, because there is no handing off. There's no baton that's handed off. People are having to constantly figure things out from the beginning. So
it's funny because I was going to do some of those variant books at Marvel, so I had to register as essentially a store kind of thing. So I get all of Marvel's publicity stuff, boxes every week.
Yeah.
But I'll pull out a box and I'll have the artwork on it of whatever the new thing is, right? Won't have the creative team. Won't have the date that it's coming out. It's just like, what was the point of this?
What am I supposed to do with this? Yeah. All right. Well, all that said, right? That's the thing that makes us despondent. What gives you hope? What keeps you making comics?
I like doing it. It's fun to draw and create things, and I don't have anybody telling me what not to do. I can do what I want to do, which is a very big thing. I do it because I like it.
It works. That absolutely works.
It's fun. I still have you throw a couple perfect lines and you feel good about that, or come up with some idea that's good, and you can get it out there to the public and see what they have to say about it, and so that's. But yeah, I still, words and pictures. I like words and pictures.
Yeah. Don't we all, man?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this, Brian. This has been a wonderful couple hours. Where can people who are rightfully fans of yours immediately upon seeing this stuff, where can they find you?
Pretty much Instagram is where I mostly will post my stuff. I do Facebook too. So Brian Haberlin at Facebook and Brian Haberlin official at Instagram.
Excellent.
Excellent. Facebook's kind of gotten a little Xy to me.
It's a little weird. Something's real. The way they play with those algorithms now is very strange.
Yeah, that was mostly the other joke, though. Is like, you know, as soon as one of these things pisses somebody off, it's the okay. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna join another one of these things. Yeah, they'll all stay user friendly and whatever. Yeah, I'm sure.
That's right.
Yeah,
Blue Sky is always going to be your friend. That's right.
But people don't understand. I keep thinking, and we should just do this, Adam. It's like, so what we do, we'll start a new organization, and the organization will be, listen, Meta doesn't mean shit without its followers, and we're going to organize the followers for walkouts. And then you and I will sell the company on the side to Meta and be out.
I'm in. God damn it, I'm in. Awesome.
I mean, that's always the funny thing. All these people who piss off about it, it's like, you guys don't understand. You are the value of this company. If you got enough of your friends to pick it, they would freak the fuck out. Not the passive, oh, I'm going to go over here, but I'm going to kind of keep my account here. Just, you know, no. It's like, no, fucking say, we're going off of it. You do it. We're going off of it. So, anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you. Awesome. And Anomaly is, I guess we can find it at Anomaly.
That's experienceanomaly.com. And we have a store there where we have signed copies of the books and all that kind of stuff.
Excellent.
And we're going to have some cool Kickstarters coming out soon, too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I can't wait for you guys to hear some more about this. Hi again. Thanks so much for watching Comic Industry Insiders. It, as always, is our pleasure to talk to the movers and shakers of comics and to bring you those conversations. We'd love it if you'd support us with a like and subscribe, and telling your friends is always good, but really what we'd want to do is hear from you. Any questions, any suggestions you have about our show, any suggested guests, frankly, anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. Our producer is nearly always Stephanie Gerk, and our researcher is Anthony Militano, who makes me look much smarter than I am. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Namaste, y'all.